All right, guys, let's take a look at week 16 across the NBA for fantasy basketball, looking at some players to potentially add ways to manipulate the schedule for your best results in weekly and daily changes leagues. Let's start by looking at the team with the best schedule for this upcoming week, and it is the Memphis Grizzlies. They play 4 games. All 4 of those games are quality games as well, and if you're curious as to what I mean by quality games, it means that the game comes on a day where there is low volume in the NBA. And to be honest, this week in the NBA, it's pretty easy to find a day where there's low volume. There's only one day for this entire week that has more than 8 games, and 8 games is what I use as the cutoff for a quality game. So there are tons of quality games, meaning streaming is going to be all the more important this week, or all the more viable, because you can do it on nearly every day. Meaning if you've got a waiver wire acquisition limit for the week, you're going to have to be very judicious in how you use those ads to get the most value out of it. But for the Grizzlies, not only do they play 4 games, not only are 4 games quality games, but the level of opponents they play are really helpful for fantasy. They start the week out with Denver, but then they play Minnesota, who's an above average team in terms of being able to generate points against them, and then the Hornets and the Knicks, which is great value for fantasy. Great numbers you can get against the Knicks. The Hornets have been pretty good to put up numbers against as well. Now, the Grizzlies aren't the greatest team in the world, quite obviously. They have their own fantasy deficiencies with lack of pace and a lot of players being injured at the moment. But that is a great opportunity to get some of these lower type players in who might actually be able to provide use for you. Someone like JaMychal Green, who's dealing with knee soreness of his own. Someone like Omri Caspi, perhaps Shelvin Mack in deeper leagues. Justin Holiday becomes pretty much a must roster guy with this type of a schedule that Memphis has for this coming week. On the flip side, Portland has 1 game this week. That is obviously terrible. So even guys like Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, Yusuf Nurkic, putting those guys in a weekly lock league is going to be pretty tough going to actually be able to think that playing 1 game of those guys is going to be enough. In nearly every situation, it won't be. So while we saw Lillard have that game off on Saturday and Seth Curry came in and played well, adding him is absolutely 0 point to it, because A, he's not going to be able to play those minutes moving forward, and B, even if he did, they have 1 game, and it's against one of the hardest opponents you can have in the Utah Jazz on Wednesday. So the Blazers have a terrible schedule for this week, so streaming Jake Layman or Mo Harkless or the Chief Al-Farouq Aminu or Seth Curry or any of those guys is really going to be pretty pointless for this coming week, just due to the way that this schedule shakes out with just only the 1 game for the Blazers. Let's look at some other things across the week. There are 9 teams that play 4 games this week. The Grizzlies, the Celtics, Hawks, Clippers, Nuggets, Hornets, Pacers, Nets, and Knicks all play 4 games this week. The Knicks, the Celtics, and the Grizzlies, all 4 of their quality games of their games this week are quality games. The other teams all play 3 quality games for the week. So that's worth bearing in mind in terms of just the streamability of some of these guys. You're getting more streamability out of Boston players or New York players and Memphis players rather than Hornets or Denver guys. There are 5 teams that play 2 games, so a really low volume week in the NBA. The Suns, the Kings, the Cavs, the Raptors, and the Wolves all play only 2 games this week, and the Blazers with that solitary game. So some pretty poor schedules there. Now the Raptors play 2 games. Both of those are on quality game days. But because there is so many teams playing 3 games and so many teams playing 2 games, this is a week where guys who do play 2 games aren't necessarily must-sit guys, like someone like Kyle Lowry, Kawhi Leonard, Karl Anthony Towns. You are still going to be able to put those guys most likely into a weekly lineup block. Now, your fringy type of guys, your Serge Ibaka's, Derrick Rose, De'Aaron Fox, they might be a bit of a struggle. Devin Booker is probably a must-roster guy, but your Kelly Oubre's, those sort of players, they're not going to be rosterable, but you get value out of Booker, you get it out of Kawhi, out of Lowry, out of Towns, those sort of guys, even with 2 games, because the majority of the league plays 3, and while that is 50% more games than 2, it's not like they're playing 100% more games and playing 4. So that is, again, it is worth mentioning and worth noting that most times if there was teams playing 2 games for the week, you'd be like, well, I can't start those guys. But on a week like this, where so many teams play 2 games and so many teams play 3 games, it becomes a bit more palatable for those high-end players. And then you've got the lower end of things, of course, with Portland playing only the 1 game. That makes them into the not start or the not roster type of scenarios for this coming week. Every day is a target day apart from Saturday. The games go as follows. There's 5 on Monday, 7 on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, 6 on Thursday, 5 on Friday, 12 on Saturday, and 3 on Super Bowl Sunday. Early games on Super Bowl Sunday there as well. So you can stream to your heart's content every day apart from Saturday, where you're not going to be able to get that value. So how do we go about streaming for this week? There's only one back-to-back to begin the week, and that's the Nets. They take on the Celtics, and then the Bulls on Monday and Tuesday. So there's going to be some value there. Brooklyn also dealing with some injuries, so someone like Shabazz Napier is a great pickup. Smoking Joe Harris, even though he is questionable for Monday, and there's a significant chance that he sits that game. Yeah, that's a bit of a risk. Trevion Graham also questionable there. You could look to stream Ed Davis for those 2 games in Brooklyn. Maybe you look at someone like Theo Pinson, who had a great game the other day, especially if Graham and Harris have to sit down. He could be a stream option for those 2 games. So some options there with Brooklyn on that Monday, Tuesday back-to-back. For Tuesday, Wednesday, we're looking at the Wizards and the Bulls. They have a back-to-back there, as do the New Orleans Pelicans. So the Pelicans have tons of value. Jahlil Okafor is a guy to grab regardless, but he's going to have value. Darius Miller, perhaps. For the Bulls, you look at Wayne Selden, potentially, who's starting for Chandler Hutchison. Bob Portis is a guy who should be rostering. Maybe you look at Robin Lopez. And for the Wizards, maybe it's Jeff Green. Maybe it's Tom Bryant that you can get some value out with those games on those back-to-backs there. Wednesday, Thursday, you've got the Dallas Mavericks who have a back-to-back. They're the only team. You look at Maxi Kleber, maybe Jalen Brunson, but he's back out of the rotation. Dwight Powell for big man numbers could be in play there. If someone dropped the pencil Harrison Barnes, which they rightfully should have, streaming him in for that back-to-back could work out. Because the reason we want to do this is because you can use one waiver wire acquisition to get 2 games worth of action. So you're not just adding someone for Wednesday, adding someone for Thursday, which in a lot of cases makes sense. Hey, let's just grab the best player for this day and stream them in. But when you've got 6 streaming days available, and you say you've only got 4 waiver wire ads, you've got to be able to get 2-for-1s out of these guys. So adding those Nets guys to start the week. 1 ad, 2 games. Adding the Bulls guys Tuesday. 1 ad, 2 games. So working that out is a great way of being able to maximize those extra games. And you could find yourself with 3-4 extra games played this week versus your opponent. And that could be the difference between a 4-5 loss or a 7-2 win. Wednesday, Thursday. Actually just did that. That was Dallas have that back-to-back there. Thursday, Friday, back-to-backs, none. And then you've got Friday, Saturday. Well, Saturday is the low or the high volume day, so no value there. So then maybe we look at pseudo back-to-back. So adding someone on Friday to get them to play Friday and Sunday. And there's a lot of teams in this boat. Memphis, Boston, they have that pseudo back-to-back. The New York Knicks have it as well, and the Oklahoma City Thunder. So to round out the week, adding a player from one of those 4 teams, you can play them on Friday. You wouldn't be able to use a waiver acquisition on Saturday anyway, and then those guys are going to be ready for Sunday too. So Terrence Ferguson in Oklahoma City could be an option. Justin Holiday in Memphis is going to be an option. For Boston, it could be someone like maybe Gordon Hayward, who rightfully has been dropped in a lot of leagues. You could look to stream him in. Maybe it's Terry Rozier, maybe it's Aaron Baines in that scenario as well. So there are going to be options of Jaylen Brown, options available to use that pseudo back-to-back at the end of the week. Back on the quality game stuff, the Oklahoma City Thunder are the only team that play 3 games that have all 3 of their games on quality days. So that's worth mentioning as well. Let's look at some players who could help you, especially for weekly lock leagues, guys that you can add who are going to be on the wire in a lot of scenarios, who you could actually find locked into your best 10 players. Marvin Williams in Charlotte, a lot of that is to do with the fact the Hornets play 3 games. They play 3 of those games at home. Williams has been inconsistent, and I'm not a must-roster Williams sort of a player, as many people seem to think he is. I'm not quite there. He can be a back-end guy, but for this week, his value really does rise. So he's got value there. Justin Holiday in Memphis, I mentioned already. With the injuries in Memphis, with the big minutes he's going to have to play, with his ability to generate steals, and the fact that the Grizzlies have the best schedule for the week, he fits in there, as does his teammate JaMychal Green, who the knee injury is a little bit of a concern. He said he was going to sit on the weekend. He said, if it hadn't been for the injuries, he would have sat, but the injuries aren't going away, so perhaps he's going to have to play through this scenario. Mitchell Robinson in New York, the 4 games really helps him. He's blocking so many shots, 10 combined block shots in the last 2 games since returning from injury. Huge field goal percentage. I think he should be rostered anyway, but he could really work out for you this week to win that category. In Atlanta, Jeremy Lin, 4 games for the Hawks this week. He is playing really, really well. in that backup role, and it's not on a per game basis that he's necessarily doing it, but he could be getting 24 minutes a night. That's 100 minutes for the week, and that's the equivalent of a 3-game guy playing 33 minutes a night, and you're not going to find a 33-minute waiver wire player with a 3-game week. So that's why those 4 games for Lynn make it really important. Alonzo Trier in New York, the 4 games help him. His minutes are up. He's going to be inconsistent because he's a rookie, and his shooting numbers are going to be all over the place. But I think he is worth looking at, especially with Emmanuel Mudiay out. You've got Bismack Biyombo as a 4-game guy for the Hornets this week, who's starting at center, provides nice rebound, block, and field goal percentage numbers. Shabazz Napier in Brooklyn with the Spencer Dinwiddie injury. He probably should be rostered anyway, but with 4 games this week for the Nets, especially to start the week with that back-to-back, it's really key in daily changes leagues. But in weekly changes leagues, I think Napier is absolutely someone worth grabbing and locking in for the week. And then in Indiana, if Tyreek Evans is gone, and I don't know what the hell's going on with him, but Corey Joseph, if Darren Collison, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Tyreek should all be rostered, but Corey Joseph, I think he's worth having a look at for this week. 4 games for the Pacers, no Victor Oladipo. He's upped his assist rate this season. He can get some steals at times. He's not a huge accumulator of other categories, but the 4 games and that bump in assists really does give Joseph some value for this coming week. So that is week 16 in the NBA. Hope that helps you guys setting your roster or making some moves and planning out your week ahead.